Morning, everybody. This is Russell Rucker. I'm here for another constitutional talk. I thought we'd go and talk about my friend Abe Lincoln here for a moment. You know, he was president from 1860 to when he was assassinated in 1865, and one of he's known as the Great Emancipator. Um, on January 1st, 1863. President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and it reads in part: I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within said designated states and parts of states are henceforth and shall be free. So he frees the slaves, not in the South, but in the areas where the Union controls. Obviously, over time, we take over the whole South, and Emancipation Proclamation becomes pretty much a law of the land. But when you're proclaiming something, it's not written in law, and so there's there's a lot of room for disputing it, which is why we get to the 13th through 15th Amendments. And these amendments are known as Reconstructionist amendments. Um, there's a lot of changes that are made, primarily giving slaves freedom, giving the right to vote, all these kinds of things. But the 13th Amendment reads Section 1: neither slavery or involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or in any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, that's a pretty broad, sweeping statement. It's getting rid of slavery and indentured servitude. Section 2: power to enforce this article, Congress shall by appropriate legislation. So, in other words, Congress shall have the power to enforce the legislation through acts of Congress. And this is just commonplace on almost all your modern amendments. But let's get back to slavery. Okay. England forced slavery upon us. They didn't let us break from it. The Declaration discusses slavery, especially in the first draft of it. And when you get into, I think it's 21 and 22, discuss just the evils of slavery and us trying to get rid of it. Way back when England controlled the colonies. So this was one of their big complaints. But slavery is an evil, no doubt. But up north, we had indentured servitude. So people were sold into servitude, or basically it's the same as slavery. Only you've signed on for a certain number of years. So in some cases, people would agree to be sold in indentured servitude to pay for their passage to America because they just didn't have the money to do so. In other cases, it was because of a crime in England or something that had occurred wrong. So you had that evil up north. And so here Lincoln brings the two together, um, ending slavery. Okay, and our amendment discusses the indentured servitude and slavery. It's just a terrible thing. It really is. Um, I've been out to some of the plantations, presidential plantations out in Virginia, Madison, Monroe's, Jefferson's, and yeah, slave quarters just really just kind of makes you sick to your stomach. At least it did for me. And it's an evil. Lincoln is known for two things. He's known for preserving the Union. for fighting the war. We lost 500,000 souls. And it is true, it's not all due to slavery. There were other issues of security, and just a complete hatred for Lincoln, really. As soon as he was elected, they started leaving the Union. And the secession movement swept the House and basically took half of the territory away from the United States. And Lincoln was determined to be president of all the states. He was really a great orator. I've been quite fascinated with Lincoln most of my life because of what he did. But the other great thing that he did, and what he's known for, is he's known as the great emancipator, because he set the slaves free. In all the areas that we controlled, and all the areas we would control. And it's just fair to give citizenships to slaves, to children of slaves, to give them the right to vote, and make them equal citizens, and all the things that we get into through the 13th through 15th. But the 13th just ends slavery and involuntary servitude. It doesn't get to all those issues. But these amendments are really important, and we'll be going through the 13th through 15th amendments on this channel as we progress through the amendment stage of our Constitution. I just want you to think how important ending slavery was, and how divisive an issue it really was. And from the beginning of our republic, arguing in the convention, many were opposed to the slave trade and slavery, and wanting to end the problem with it. And here we are, all the way into the 1860s, and fighting a war, basically because we couldn't get along over it. We couldn't settle the issue. There was slavery up north that had been slowly eradicated, and the founders thought that it would end on its own as more and more states got rid of it. But they were afraid to get rid of it initially, because they were worried about Georgia and the Carolinas not signing on to the Constitution and splitting up our Union of States into several different countries. And that was the great fear, and why it wasn't taken care of initially. And I know a lot of our citizens complain about the Constitution because of this very thing. But really, that's the best they could do at the time. And we wound up having to fight a very bloody war to get rid of, mostly, it was about slavery. I mean, you get into your states' rights, and the states being allowed to conduct their own concerns. But they were really worried about losing a way of life that they had. Most people in the South did not own slaves. It's just the truth of the matter. But when the states left, many people fought for the South because they lived in the South. It was not an act of treason. It was an act of their homeland. So I hope you think about that for a few minutes, and I hope you can get past the Great War and understand our Congress did give all the veterans, North or South, a veteran status eventually. And I think that's really important, to not hate one side or the other here, and realize it was just a horrible situation that we were left with from England. And it took all this time and all this effort. And slavery did divide this country for decades, nearly 100 years, fighting over it. So I want you to think about that and the importance of the 13th Amendment. And I'll catch you next time on the next Constitutional Talk. You folks have a good day now. Goodbye.